Do you think you could figure out Superman's identity, Dayton?
I got a little thinker up here, so yeah. I'm actually a genius.
Excuse me, you have a little thinker?
Yeah, I mean, if he was a big thinker, he wouldn't fit up here.
He's got a little man inside his head.
This is episode 2 of I Finally Saw, where today I finally saw Superman the movie. Well, hello and welcome once again. Oh my goodness, we're very excited, apparently, from our crowd to talk about this movie today. So joining me today, I have Marquise.
What's up?
I have Dayton.
Hello.
Thank you. And then we have a new face joining us for the first time ever. We have Will. Oh, look at that. For our audio-only listeners, he's got a little Superman Lego. That's awesome. So, Will, being that you're new to the panel for the show, I have a little question that I like to ask folks the first time that they're on their show. And so I'm now going to ask that to you, which is, right now, what is one movie that you think you can just endlessly rewatch over and over again, just so the audience can get to know you a little bit?
That's a good question. There's this movie I used to watch a lot with my grandmother called Paper Moon.
Ooh.
It came out around like the 70s. It's about like this Bible salesman. He tries to get along with this girl, and they go on like a road trip. I'm trying to describe it as basic as possible, but it's black and white, 1973. But I don't want to spoil anything, but just go in it with blind expectations if you want to watch it.
Wow, I can't say I'm familiar with that one. That's interesting. So yes, as you probably read from the title and heard from our intro, today we are talking about Superman the movie, 1978. And just to introduce us a little bit, here is a snippet that I have copy and pasted from Wikipedia and Google because I'm too lazy to write anything myself. Superman the movie is a 1978 superhero film based on DC Comics featuring the eponymous character played by Christopher Reeve. The film was directed by Richard Donner and featured an ensemble cast including Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, Jeff East, Margot Kidder, and others. The premise of the movie is just before the destruction of the planet Krypton, scientist Jor-El, portrayed by Marlon Brando, sends his infant son Kal-El on a spaceship to Earth. Raised by kindly farmers Jonathan, played by Glenn Ford, and Martha Kent, played by Phyllis Thaxter, young Clark Kent, played by Christopher Reeve again, discovers the source of his superhuman powers and moves to Metropolis to fight evil. As Superman, he battles the villainous Lex Luthor, portrayed by Gene Hackman, and while as a novice reporter Clark Kent, he attempts to woo his co-worker Lois Lane, portrayed by Margot Kidder.
Once there was a civilization, much like ours, but with a greater intelligence, greater powers, and a greater capacity for good. In one tragic moment, that world was destroyed. But there was one survivor.
Although actually, young Clark Kent is portrayed by two different actors. When there's obviously the young child, and then I believe it's a different actor when he's a high schooler.
Yeah, there's three actors actually that do young Clark Kent.
Oh yeah, because then there's the baby.
But then there's also
there's a baby, there's a toddler, and then there's a high schooler. So, unfortunately, I don't have those names on hand.
I found out that like the high schooler was a different actor just because my mom walked in and was like, "Oh yeah, I always thought the high school version of him was hotter than Christopher Reeves," and then just walked out.
It do be like that.
Wow. Well, thank you, Mrs. Dayton's mom, for that. Well, so yes, 1978. So this is a year after Star Wars. And I bring that up just because there's a small connection. Obviously, both of these movies were scored by John Williams, who famously also did the music for Star Wars. And I always think, obviously, we weren't around back then, so we kind of have to sort of pick up the historical pieces as we remember, and as people, or not as we remember, but as people tell us from what they remember. And I always remember people sort of talking about that most of the 1970s were sort of defined by very low budget, very sort of gritty characters, very sort of grounded. What's the other movie that we sort of talk about from the early 70s with the bikers? Easy Rider, right.
Yeah.
which is like very gritty. And so Superman, and then before that, Star Wars comes out in 1977. It's very sort of different to that culturally. It's very uplifting. It's very blockbuster. It's very fairy tale. And so I guess I just sort of wonder, its own little sort of side tangent, but I wonder if that sort of set the stage for a movie like this to sort of come along and be like another big sort of hopeful blockbuster adventure. Part of the reason I really wanted to talk about this movie is we have obviously the new Superman movie coming out, directed by James Gunn, and that movie is quite literally pulling so much from this movie. Even from at the time we're recording this, it hasn't come out yet, so we'll see. But even down to the fact that they're still sort of reusing John Williams' melody in this new movie, it felt like an appropriate time to revisit this, because I think even Kevin Feige, who's sort of the figurehead for, Marvel over at Marvel recently, has gone on record to say that this movie is kind of like even still the skeleton for so many of the movies that they make. And I hear so many people say that, like, superheroes are now sort of this genre, and all of that goes back to this movie. So that's part of why I was sort of keen to sort of discuss it. Really quick, before we kind of get a little further into that, I want to go around the table, this virtual table we have here, and ask everybody, prior to preparing for this podcast, what was your level of familiarity with this movie? Really quick, I'll start with Marquise. How familiar were you with this movie before getting ready for today?
Well, obviously, the 1978 Superman was just a stable in inspiration for current superhero movies. So obviously I've heard about it before. I've actually watched it a couple times before, but for this podcast I actually watched it with like my film cap on. But obviously, like everyone knows Superman. I think this movie is what made Superman so iconic today.
What about you, Dayton? What's your familiarity?
I mean, I knew Superman existed, and I was like, there has to be a movie, so I just kind of saw it around. The only thing I knew about it was, like, I was watching, like, the YouTube show Geek Love, like the IGN dating show.
Oh, no.
And there was a guy who was obsessed with Superman who talked about that movie a lot in his episode.
Well, good for him.
That's it, pretty much. I had never seen this movie
It's
until,
Geek
like,
Love
2 days
IGN
ago.
episode. That's wonderful. All right. Well, Will, what about you? How familiar are you with this movie prior to getting ready for today?
Well, I grew up watching this movie and its sequels. Not as much the sequels, like The Quest for Peace, like the fourth one. But I think one of the first movies I saw, which I guess it's a sequel to this one, was Bryan Singer's Superman Returns.
Oh,
Which,
yeah.
like, it's the one with Brandon Routh.
Yes.
That's like one of the first movies I remember, like seeing in theaters, because it opens the same it has Marlon Brando's like opening monologue. So yeah, I've been familiar with these movies for a long time.
Okay, interesting. I think, speaking on myself, I very much have a similar sentiment to that of like Marquise, where this is a movie that I know in reputation very well. Like I said, like so many people have cited it as a point of reference for so many superhero movies that are coming out today. The music is iconic. It is like the Superman theme, even all these decades later. So I feel like I know that melody by heart. But I had definitely never seen it. I knew things and like snippets because it's just so constantly referenced in pop culture. But it was more sort of like these little fragments, and I didn't necessarily know how they all fit together into one big movie.
Because of the wisdom and compassion of Jor-El, because he knew the human race had the capacity for goodness, he sent us his only son.
Yeah, I'm curious, because it seems like Marquise and Will, I'm curious because it seems like you guys have a level of familiarity to it. I'm curious, when was the last time you watched this movie, and have your opinions on it changed since revisiting it?
I can go first. As the comic book nerd resident, like I said, I've watched this movie a bunch of times. I think the last time I watched it before rewatching again for this podcast was back in December, right after I watched the Super Slash Man documentary, the Christopher Reeve story. So I watched it. I watched it after that just to like appreciate the performance that Christopher Reeves had. Honestly, I think Christopher Reeves' performance alone is what makes this movie so impactful. And yeah, and if you haven't watched that documentary, you should. It's very good. But yeah, that was the last time I watched it.
Do you feel like your stance has sort of shifted on it? Do you feel like you like it more, like it less?
I think now when my rewatch, like I'm thinking about it like from a technical perspective, I really do enjoy it a lot more. Just from like the special effects aspect. I think the special effects is like so good for like the time, especially in the 70s when it came out. And it some of it rivals some of the effects that we have today, for sure.
I'm curious, was this something that was introduced to you by like your parents? Was this something that they had a level of familiarity with, and that's what they sort of imparted on?
Yeah, it's something my mom showed me when I was younger. I don't really remember the first time I saw it.
Sorry, when was the last time you saw it?
I rewatched it today.
And then prior to that, what do you think was the last time?
I think before that was like earlier this year. Because I think ever since James Gunn dropped the trailer was I kind of revisited it. And also the documentary Marquise was talking about. I saw that when it came out. Beautiful, interesting, tragic story. Yeah, I think it's beautiful. Like, I think it's shot beautifully. I know it had the same cinematographer from Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Really?
That's all I know. Yeah, Jeffrey Unsworth. Other than that, like, I honestly love Reeves' performance, specifically as Clark Kent. Is like, he seems like he got it down to a T. Like, from Superman and Clark Kent. Like, I kind of forgot how different it was.
So Dayton, you said you weren't as familiar, right? That this was something that was preparing for this the first time you had seen it in its entirety?
I hadn't even seen clips of it before. I've
Wow.
never seen like any of it.
So I'm curious,
Yeah, I've only seen like poster.
because we're sort of in similar positions. And what did you think of this movie? Because you're kind of a modern superhero movie fan.
I was honestly, there were a lot of moments I really liked. However, I was mostly bored. I was pretty bored throughout most of the movie.
Oh boy.
It's the like, there's so many moments I'm like, wow, I really like that performance of Superman, because I like Superman as a character.
Mhm.
But there are long swaths of this movie I was on my phone and I was not. I would like, I just couldn't, because I was pretty bored.
Oh, is there?
I it was not. That's pretty bad. But I was paying attention. I was paying attention. But like,
Bro wanted to stop halfway and watch a video essay.
that was not. That's not true. Now that's not true. I'm not going to pull a Marquise. I did. I was mostly paying attention. It was never during scenes they were talking, but it was like. But it was just a lot of times where I was like, this movie does drag on a bit. But there are like I could definitely list moments I really like. Like every time Superman flies away, I love how he just says bye. It just goes back to flying. Like Christopher Reeve's performance when he's doing like Superman stuff is very entertaining, because he captures that like Superman is just a country boy who's like has superpowers and wants to do good, and I love that. But yeah, there's a lot of moments in this movie I was just bored.
Oh
Yeah,
boy.
yeah, I can definitely agree on a lot of parts dragging on, especially the scene with him running next to the train. That part drags on for so long. And what's even crazier is that there's a deleted scene of the little girl in the car, and you find out that's Lois Lane.
What?
That's in the theatrical, is it not?
Yeah, and no, that's not in the. So it's in the Donner cut of the thing, but it's not in the theatrical version. So that scene is even supposed to be even longer than what most people have seen.
Oh, that must have been the cut I watched earlier. Because it didn't say Donner cut specifically. I just watched like the Blu-ray I had.
I remember just laughing a long time during that scene.
Yeah,
So
it was just
it wasn't
sped
too
up.
long for me. It's a very impressive technically.
Yeah.
It's just funny.
I remember the funny thing is my brother walked in when that scene was playing, and he was just like, "Dang, this looks better than Smallville." So
It looks really good. I've just signed it funny. It looks funny.
yeah, I don't know. I don't remember that scene going on very long, to be honest with you. I feel like the part of this movie that I remember going on for quite a while was the opening credits.
Oh my!
Which like I do have a soft spot for. I have a soft spot for proper opening credits in movies, and there's a part of me that is like a little sad when some movies don't kind of take the effort. I get why we're moving away from that and we've been moving away from it for a long time because like, you know, you want to keep the audience engaged. But I remember like the first like few minutes of the opening credits, I was like really kind of pumped because, you know, the music's going and there's something about the way space is achieved in, you know, sort of pre-CGI movies that has this sort of tactile painted charm I really like. And then I remember like it was getting to the end of the credits, and maybe I'm just like a really bad muncher, but I had finished like most of my popcorn.
You ate all your popcorn already.
I think by the time the credits. So maybe I'm just scrounging that stuff down by the fistful, and I need to seriously address that problem. But
You ate all your popcorn.
Yeah. Well,
I hate all that popcorn.
to be fair, that like the opening credits were like groundbreaking for its time. Like that was the first time anyone had like done something as like special as that for the opening credits. So I think it's cool in that respect that like it opened a door for other movies to do that. But I can get how it dragged on.
For me, it's like a monkey doing backflips repeatedly. It's like it's cool the first few times. You're like, oh my god, it keeps doing backflips. But as soon as it goes to like 5 minutes, you're like, is this monkey gonna keep going?
Well, the opening scene I really like when like the little kid is like opening the book and like there's like the narrator reading like the Daily Planet and then you zoom in on the Daily Planet. That was actually shot backwards, by the way, but yeah, but I really like that scene. But then it goes into the Marlon Brando, Christopher Reeve, like you know what I mean. And it's just
That was back whenever superhero movies were happy they were from comics.
exactly.
I thought that was a really neat touch, as well. To really sort of pay tribute. I thought it's a small thing, but I thought it was interesting because there's a few actors whose names are listed out. I think the first one that comes down is Marlon Brando, and it's like a couple actors.
Yeah.
And then you get the title card, and immediately after the title card, when the music starts swelling, it's Christopher Reeve. But there was some sort of contractual thing there. But I thought, in any case, it's a happy little coincidence. Whether, I mean, maybe it was intentional, I don't know. But I thought that was like when the Superman title card comes out, the first actor whose name comes along is indeed Superman, and so that was a touch that I thought was really neat. I think this was a movie that was really interesting to finally kind of put the pieces together for, because I think I have, like I said, I think I've spent a lot of my life seeing bits and pieces of it. You know, I've seen probably a lot of people parody the like Prism prison. I don't know what that thing is called, but when Zod and his two cronies are trapped in the prism, like I've seen so many people like parody that throughout sort of fiction, and there's just something as well about Reeve as Superman that really is so iconic. I think sometimes I look at I wish I could remember. I saw someone tweet something years ago now, and it's always sort of stuck with me, which is just that, like, when you look at, like, the behind the scenes and the promotional pictures of Reeve in the suit just, like, standing on top of buildings, it's kind of crazy because, like, you look at that photo and it almost just looks like a historical photograph of, like, the real Superman. And I think that's how ingrained him and his portrayal of that character kind of go hand in hand. Is like it's crazy, but like I see him in the suit and like I can see how like sewn on the logo is, and yet I'm like, that's the real Superman in a certain way. Like he got it down on pat. And I think for like the first major cinematic adaptation of this character, because I know there was believe there was a few serials in the 40s, but for the first like major motion picture adaptation of this character to get it so right, especially when that's a courtesy that I don't think every superhero has had.
Yeah.
It's kind of spectacular. There's a lot of I love the montage in the middle of the movie where it's just him saving all these random people, and then it sort of caps off on him rescuing the little cat out of the tree, and then he gets a little girl injured. That took me by surprise, because there's this moment. There's that. Do you guys remember this? There's like the little girl who's like, "Mommy, mommy,
yeah,
some man came down and saved my cat, and then he flew away." And then she's like, "Don't lie." And then it's just a smack sound effect.
Yeah.
Superman got that poor
Wait.
girl
I forgot about
Oh my god.
I just think it's funny because that's the first night he was out and about as Superman, so nobody knew who he was yet. So there's just like all these different scenes of people explaining who Superman is, and they're like, "Oh, I don't believe you." Like there's like the scene with the cop. He's like,
Oh my
he
God.
flew down and he flew away with a blue suit and red boots. He's like, and the other cop's like, "Go to the bar. I'll catch up with you."
The
And
smart
he's
one
like-
was the pilot. The smart one was the
Yeah.
pilot who was like, "Just keep flying.
Yeah,
You won't
exactly.
believe. Just go, keep
Oh
going."
yeah. The engine on a jet airliner explodes, and so Superman swoops in there and basically replaces the engine. And then the two pilots are looking out the window, and then the other pilot's like, "What happened? Did we get our engine back?" And he's like, "Don't look, just keep flying." Yeah, I love that little montage. It's wonderful. It just fills you with like whimsy and wonder, and it just gives you this like wonderful warm feeling that like Superman really is, your friend. And it's so sort of moving. There's sort of the allegorical aspect of it that I've always sort of found interesting. And there's like nowadays there's a lot of talk to be made about the whole like sort of Messiah angle, but the thing that I've always found a little bit more interesting than that is the historical sort of. I mean, Superman, to my knowledge, was created by two Jewish men in the late 40s, and his origin story is that he is a guy who comes to America following the destruction of his home due to callous ignorance, and then has to sort of figure out who he is and try and integrate and try and do better. So obviously there's a lot to sort of be pulled from there in regards to what a lot of Jewish people were going through at the time.
It's hope. Like Superman just like represents hope. It's hopeful, and that's why we love him so much.
I have such a sort of soft spot for just earnesty in characters, especially when it's well done, and Superman really does just imbue you, especially in this movie, with this just like sense of like wanting to do better for other people, of wanting to be a good neighbor for other people. And it's just very sweet, and there's so many little moments where I'm just like, this feels so tactile. I love the way his flying in this movie, the way Superman flies in this movie, I love that it oftentimes in sort of modern Superman media and modern superhero media, they really sort of emphasize the power that flying, and the shock waves and the rumbling right before they take off, and then like the boom, the build up and all that. And not to say that that's an incorrect approach. And part of it is just the way it sort of looks and feels in this movie, I guess, has to do with just the way that wire work was sort of done at the time, I have to assume. But I think there's a Peter Pan allusion made to Superman early in the movie, and I think that's a really wonderful comparison that they make, because when he flies, there's this sense of just utter weightlessness to him, and with the way his cape billows, it doesn't necessarily feel powerful, but it feels magical. There's something magical I feel when I see him flying in this movie, because it's just this sense of utter. It's not this like powerful, like the ground is rumbling and like it's just like, so long, stranger, and then he just like picks himself up and floats away, and it feels like this sort of magical best friend, and I just love that. I love that ending shot, where he's just flying and you see the circumference of the earth around him, and his cape is billowing behind him, and he just smiles and he waves at you, and it just feels like a friend saying hello that I've been wanting to meet my whole life. There is, of course, also with every good superhero story, a good supervillain. Of course, this movie primarily features Gene Hackman, if I remember correctly, portraying Lex Luthor.
Yep.
What do you guys think about this? Because this isn't necessarily the vibe I immediately think of when I think of Lex, especially as I'm sort of used to more modern interpretations of him. I'm curious. I want to start with Will, actually, really quick, if that's all right. I want to ask, Will, do you have anything to say about this version of Lex Luthor?
I mean, I think he's definitely more, I guess, what's the right word? Like, he's more like goofy in a way. I don't know how to describe it. Like, all of his wigs he has, he lives like an underneath, like the subway trains or like that area, some secret area. But
yeah,
I haven't read too many.
It's definitely a little goofier.
Yeah.
So what I find really interesting about this character, and that you said like this is like how you said this is different from modern interpretations of Lex Luthor. What I find so interesting about this movie is how it impacted future comics. Like, this movie did so many things originally, and Lex Luthor is one of them. This was like the first time Lex Luthor was depicted as like a businessman. Like, his whole scheme is to blow up California, sink it, so that he can sell the real estate that he just bought at a better price, because now it's Shoreline, right? In the comics, Lex Luthor was more of like a mad scientist. Like, he was his interest was getting rid of Superman because he thought he was like a threat to the world. But in this movie, it seems that he's just more worried about Superman stopping his evil business ideas instead of Superman being like a menace. You know what I mean? So I find that really interesting how that carries on into future interpretations of Lex Luthor, where he is this mad scientist, but now he's also this businessman with like LexCorp and all that good stuff. And so I like how that movie had this impact on Superman lore as it continued forward.
It's interesting because it's like they kind of took a look at who Superman is, and they boiled him down, and they're like, ultimately, Superman is hope. He is selflessness. Superman is selflessness because he continuously puts himself in the way of danger to help other people, just because it's the right thing to do. He helps people because it's the right thing to do. And so it was like they sort of boiled that essence down, and then they took a look at it, and they're like, well, what's the opposite of that? Selfishness, obviously, right? And so they were like, he can't just be this evil scientist. And so I think it's I wasn't aware that like this wasn't necessarily the case, so I think it's really kind of an inspired choice then to have the bad guy, the evil force that Superman has to go up against, literally just be greed, is so interesting. Dayton, I kind of want to throw it to you. Was there anything regarding sort of the portrayal of Lex that you found interesting, or any performance really?
I thought he was good. I didn't have anything notable really to think about with him. I was mostly just like, at first I was confused about the wig, but then I was like, oh, and then like at the end I see the bald head and I'm like, okay, that's Lex. He's fully Lex, but...
Well, so that if I remember correctly, right, he didn't want to actually shave his head.
Yeah, Gene Hackman didn't want to shave his head. I'm pretty sure at the end it's just a bald cap.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, he didn't want the bald cap on his head the entire time. Yeah, he didn't want to shave his head, so you just do it near the end, just as like a joke.
But even then, I think it lends itself to how just like egotistical Lex is, right? Like he's such a vain person that he doesn't want people to know that he's bald. And I think it's also interesting how they gave him two original side characters, Eve Tessmacher and Otis, and those characters had never existed before in the comics. And so I love how they give them to him so that he to just show how egotistical he is and how he's always like bashing Otis and disregarding Tessmacher.
That is one thing I want to talk. Whenever like Otis is like being followed, it's like a big thing of like he's a fool. And then the very first thing that like Lex really does in the movie is that he kills the guy to
Yeah, he kills
cop,
the cop.
fix
yeah.
it for his
Yeah.
he kills the cop to fix his like henchman's mistake, and that's a really cool introduction for the character because it's so goofy kind of how it happens, but then it's like it is kind of brutal that he got run over by a train.
Yeah, that caught me off guard.
Yeah,
And I think
Well-
Eve was like freaking out during that scene as well,
Yeah.
and he just didn't have any like reaction to that. He's
Mhm.
like, oh well.
Well, speaking of performances, is another one I want to touch on, and that's Margot Kidder as Lois Lane, which I think is also like another just really strong performance. I know everybody talks about Reeve,
Yeah.
but I think this is also just another case of like a character that is really well casted, really well delivered, and I mean, I'm not as familiar with the character of Lois. But I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if some people point to this version being their definitive interpretation of the character. She's so charming on screen, and you know, in a similar way to Reeve, she also kind of has to flip-flop between these two almost versions of herself, depending on who, like which version of Clark per se she's interacting with, what Christopher Reeve's approach in that scene is. She sort of has to match that, and so I also think that's like really well done, the way that she sort of shifts herself, whether like she's being the very sort of fast talking, no nonsense reporter whenever she's dealing with Clark, to where she's so sort of engrossed in the things that she needs to get done and the work that she needs to accomplish that she's kind of not really paying much mind to bumbling Clark, to then having to shift to this very sort of like, I mean, she says it, she's giggling like a schoolgirl, I think is what she says, or something to that effect, when she's around sort of Superman. And I find the way she also sort of has to flip-flop as well, I think that's also, you know, it's not as apparent because, you know, she doesn't have as flagrant of a costume change, but I thought that was also just really well executed. This is something that I've seen mocked a lot, so I could be wrong about this. I haven't really researched this. The understanding that I get from a lot of nerds is that people seem to think that Superman literally turned back the Earth physically, and the physical rotation of the Earth in the opposite axis is what caused it to go back in time. I don't mean to become an actually person, but I don't think that that's what happened.
No, he just went back. He just went back in time, and everything reversed.
I think the Earth spinning backwards is just supposed to be a visual representation of time shifting. I don't think that Donner's intention was that literally if we turned the Earth the other way, time would go back in time. But I've seen so many people growing up lambast this point. It's a visual medium. It's like it's a representation. I don't know. I'm getting worked up
What if
about
we
nothing.
spin the Earth left?
Oh,
We should take Metropolis and push it somewhere else.
push it somewhere else. So we were talking about performances, and there's one performance that I want to talk about, and it's the highest paid actor in that movie, Marlon
yes.
Brando.
Krypton!
I hate him. I hate that man.
The planet Krypton!
No, I think it's crazy because he's coming off of the success of The Godfather, right? It's like 1972, 1974, early 1970s, right? He's at this point, 1978. He's like a big actor, so he's like at that time he was the highest paid actor ever on this movie, and he also had like a large share of the profits of this movie in his contract. And I think it's crazy. They even changed Superman lore for him because originally the S that Superman wears was never associated with the House of L. But Marlon Brando said he wouldn't do the movie unless he was able to wear the Superman S. So they changed Superman lore to make it to where the S is the House of L, is like the House of L symbol, which I think is so crazy because that's essentially affected history. Like now in modern day retellings of Superman, that the S that he wears is of the House of L, which I find so funny. And I think for all these demands he made, he phoned in his performance so hard.
God, what pisses me off? What pisses me off the most? There's the scene where he's talking to the baby, where he's talking to Clark. He's like doing that recording, right? He was reading off the diaper. They put the script on the diaper, and he said like, "Oh yeah, my performance would be better if you put the script on the diaper." I swear.
That is so good. I love that.
You are the highest paid actor of all time. You can't remember your lines.
Hold on. So let me get this straight. Because, well, I will say this. I saw I saw a clip from years ago of Christopher Reeve on a talk show talking about Brando. And I didn't know the full story, but Christopher Reeve, I believe he talks about how he was sort of disappointed in Brando because he was like, this was an opportunity for him to be more of a leader in Hollywood, to be more of a champion for younger actors, to sort of put the best example forward, and I feel that he didn't do that. And he was very curt and professional with his answer, but Reeve was basically saying something to the effect of that, like he was saying something to the effect of that he wasn't fully impressed with Brando's behavior on set. So I didn't know. So Brando wanted to basically get cue cards. And they were like, "How are we supposed to?" You're looking at the baby, and his bright idea was they write the dialogue on the diaper of the baby in that scene.
Yeah,
Genius.
That's crazy,
Bro,
yeah. No, I had to double check because I've heard this before, so I had to check online. It is true. Like they wrote lines on the diaper of the baby, just because he didn't want to memorize his lines. He probably was drunk too, actually.
There's like another like God.
He'll pull to Orson Welles.
Yeah, like, but there's another Godfather connection to this movie, and I think the screenplay and the story was from Mario Puzo. I think that's how you say his name. He did the Godfather book. He wrote the original book for the Godfather.
Really?
So I wonder if him writing the story and the screenplay has to do with Marlon.
You think they approached
like, we
him
gotta
and
have
hey, your buddy Marlo, huh? You think Donner approached him and was like, "Hey, you're friends with Marlo, right? Can you do us a favor? Can you call him up? Can you call him up and see? It'd be a huge favor. Be a huge favor for us." That's funny.
We got a super idea.
It's pretty funny to me that his dad apparently had time to embed his consciousness, but not his mom. Like, isn't there? I think isn't there a skit about that on some show or something where she's like, "Did you make a crystal of my memories?" And he's like, "Oh, no, ran out of time, I guess."
That's messed up.
The boy needs his mother, I would say. I was really sort of surprised by the depiction of Krypton blowing up. I thought it was weirdly disturbing, which I guess like there's no way to not make a planet and all of its inhabitants blowing up, but I thought it was really well done. I thought it was very visceral. I thought it was very creative, the way it was just all of these like very quick cuts and like the imagery of all the people just like falling into those chasms. I was like, if I saw this movie if I was 8 years old in 1978 and I go to the movie theater, I probably would have had nightmares from that scene. Just very like visceral. So I loved it. I love that scene. When
I first saw that scene, I jumped up and I was like, "Oh my god, it's the scene from Megamind."
Literally, my rewatch today, I realized that they're making fun Marlon Brando's performance in Megamind.
Oh yeah.
I was like, to me, my son. When Megamind pretends to be Titan's dad, they're making fun of Marlon Brando's performance, and I never realized that till I rewatched it today.
Oh shoot,
You're so right.
dude! Megamind hates Marlon Brando too.
Everybody hates Marlon Brando, apparently.
Just pull up that clip.
Oh
To
boy.
me, my son.
I am your father.
I gotta be honest with you. I think this is the first Marlon Brando performance I've ever seen. So, maybe not the greatest.
Bro,
Probably
it's never
mine too.
watched.
That's all you're
I
gonna
haven't
get.
seen The Godfather.
I have not seen The Godfather. Wow. No. Wow. I should see The Godfather someday. But anyways, I really want to briefly touch on the score again. I know we brought it up, but my goodness, there are never enough words that can be said, in my opinion, to gush about John Williams and his musical talent. He is so good at coming up with these like deceptively simple melodies that just worm their way into your ear and make you want to hum along. And you know, you can carry that melody for all of your life, and you hear it and you're like, I know what that is. And that's hard. Like, coming up with simple, easily memorable melodies, that's so difficult. And he just has made so many of these, and I think it's no coincidence that people are still coming back to that melody and being like, that is Superman. He beautifully musically distilled this identity of hope and triumph, and yeah, just it's there's a reason we keep coming back to it, and that's not to say that there's no chance of something just as iconic or potentially even better coming along down the line. Part of me does kind of hope and encourage that, you know, people still kind of try to find new avenues for portraying and exploring that character musically. But also, on the other hand, like I said, like so many times now, there's a reason I think we keep coming back to it. And, you know, of course, there's also much to be said about the rest of the score as well. You know, John just is so good at capturing the spirit of adventure, I think is the way I would put it. It just, so many movies that he's worked on, when you listen to it, it's just like, yeah, this is a journey. This is an adventure that we are embarking on and we are being invited to. And I really like the score. I don't know how you guys feel about it. I guess I'm kind of speaking for everybody.
John Williams is brilliant every time. I don't think there's like every time, like nearly all, like any popular movie theme that you're able to like memorize the melody, it was John Williams probably. The only one I can think of that he didn't do was probably like the Avengers theme.
Yeah,
That's it.
Alan Silvestri did Back to the
Did he do-
Future and Avengers.
Yeah, Back to the Future.
So those
Did
are
he do-
also up there.
Oh, I was gonna ask who did Back to the Future. Okay,
That was
then
Alan
yeah, we have,
Silvestri.
like, two
Alan
people.
Silvestri's also up there. He's also a great composer. I love his melodies.
I love John Williams' theme for Superman. It again, like, it just fills me with so much hope and joy for the future. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that's what Superman should represent. And what he does represent is hope. So like, I'm really happy that James Gunn decided to kind of come back to that same theme for his Superman movie. And I'm very excited to see what that composer did with John Williams' original theme.
I specifically love the right after the opening credits when you first see Krypton. There's like a certain melody that plays that John Williams does, like when you first see the planet. I'm not gonna hum it, but it's
There's this,
like it's
yeah, there's this other moment too, which I think is right when, because John Williams is sort of known for typically like very tactile brass sound, which I think was sort of against the grain at the time, because especially as you start to get into the 80s, which is this is sort of nearing, and even before then, soundtracks certainly weren't these big orchestral, like calling back to adventure serials things, to my knowledge. And again, I think Star Wars certainly sort of paved the way for that with John Williams' work on that. But and Jaws too, I suppose. But there's this moment, I think it's right when Superman discovers Lois Lane's buried car and he pulls her out, and it's these synthesizers that are playing these sort of wistful runs of notes, where it's just, and these big panning or big fat wide shots of just the car and the desert, and that sort of wistful, quiet morning sound just made such an impression on me. So, you know, obviously the main theme is iconic, but there's other moments of musical brilliance throughout.
His name is Kal-El. He will call himself Clark Kent. But the world will know him as Superman.
So, I think I want to go ahead and bring us home here to start closing out this discussion. So I want to once again pose a question to all of you, which is, would you recommend this movie to somebody? So let's start with Dayton. Would you recommend this movie to people?
It really depends on if they're a superhero fan or not.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, well, I think there's just a lot of fun in it. I just don't. I think a modern like person who doesn't care too much about history, I don't think they'd care to like. It depends on if they like Superman as a character, and if they don't, I don't really see them enjoying this movie that much. Personally, I love parts of this movie, even if it drags. But I just don't think that somebody who's like a general movie audience nowadays would really care for this.
Okay. Will, what about you?
I guess like if you kind of want to like discover who this character is and like what he represents, yes. Because I feel like that's gonna happen quite soon with the new Superman movie. You kind of get like a new like interpretation of it, or like an older like classic interpretation of it. And yeah, I think it's a good starting point if you're interested in Superman at all. But for general audiences, maybe. I mean, my mom liked it, so like back in the 90s or whatever. So,
Marquise, what about you?
I feel like if you want to feel like that sense of hope, that sense of like warmness inside of your heart, this is the movie to do that. I feel like every time I watch this movie, all I can do is smile. And yeah, I just think this movie is just so great in that respect.
Yeah. You know, personally, I think if you have an interest in superheroes, period, I do think that you kind of owe it to yourself to approach this movie with an open heart and really kind of look at where so much of where we are at today with that genre is sort of owed to. But also, I think, like Marquise said, if you want just a warm, fuzzy adventure, if you want something that imbues you with that spirit of feeling uplifted, then this is the movie for that. And yeah, it's a movie that's hopeful, and I really appreciate that, and I very thoroughly enjoyed it. So if that's something you're looking for, then I would for sure recommend this movie.
This year, Superman brings you the gift of flight. Superman, the movie.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to close out this discussion. I thank you all for joining me. I love you all, and good night.